All right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at a piece from Aaron Dembski-Bowden's Warhammer 40K novel, For the Fallen. We'll be checking out how the Crimson Fists remember their fallen, specifically on their homeworld, Rin's world.
You know, what makes this really interesting is we get to experience this through the eyes of this aging necronomer.
Oh, okay.
He's come to Rin's world to study how the Crimson Fists, deal with death and remember their dead.
Yeah.
He's searching for what he calls emotional truth.
So it's not just like, dates and names and battles, but more like the feelings, the rituals, that kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. But his first encounter with the Crimson Fists is anything but, like scholarly. He's kneeling before this massive statue in the necropolis, and suddenly, boom, 5 Astartes just appear.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I bet that was pretty intimidating, especially the way Dembski-Bowden describes them. I mean, their armor and weapons and just their sheer size.
Yeah, there's a little bit of dark humor in the way Dembski-Bowden, writes it. At first, the Astartes kind of rib Esca a little bit, almost like predators toying with prey.
Yeah.
But the moment they realize, he's there out of respect, things change.
It's like a switch flips.
Right. Intimidation becomes respect.
Shows you the different sides of these warriors, right? I mean, they're weapons of war, but they can also be reverent and, what's the word, like understanding.
Absolutely. And this is shown perfectly when Chaplain Argo, the leader of the squad, takes his helmet off. And he's described as surprisingly young, with kind eyes.
Yeah.
Not at all the grizzled veteran you might expect.
I mean, that really makes you think about what's beneath the armor of these, superhuman warriors.
For sure. And then Argo drops this line: hatred keeps us crusading, regret brings us home, shame always calls us back.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's a heavy statement.
Right. That tells us a lot about the psychology of these Astartes. They might be fueled by hatred, but it's regret and shame that truly tie them to Rin's world,
Yeah.
to their chapter, and, of course, the memory of their fallen brothers.
Yeah, I mean, it's like these kind of negative emotions, the things they struggle with. It's what grounds them in a universe that's constantly trying to tear them apart.
Right. And it's this raw emotion that Esca is looking for. He's used to just, dry, factual accounts. But the Crimson Fists are giving him something way more, real, way more personal.
And that brings us to the heart of the excerpt, I guess. The memories of Atherin, the fallen space marine Esca's studying. Each warrior shares a memory of him, kind of piecing together his personality like a puzzle almost.
Yeah, and it's interesting how each memory shows us a different side of Atherin. Toma, the warrior with the silver shoulder guard, remembers his amazing marksmanship. Said he never saw Atherin miss a shot.
Then there's Imric, the one with the skull bandolier. He remembers how strong Atherin was in close combat. Even admitted he still holds a grudge for losing a fist fight to Atherin.
Oh.
It's these little bits of humor that make them feel more relatable, more human.
Absolutely. And then there's Apothecary Vane. He's the one who harvested Atherin's gene seed. So even in death, Atherin's legacy continues, literally woven into the future of the chapter.
Yeah, it reminds you that for the Astartes, death isn't the end. Their essence, their genes, live on in their brothers.
Right. But maybe the most touching memory comes from Demetrian, the one with the axe. He talks about Atherin's laughter, the void he's left. It's such a simple thing, but it tells you so much about their bond.
Each memory builds on the last, right? You realize Atherin wasn't just a warrior. He was a friend, a brother, someone who made people laugh. You can tell Esca's deeply affected by these stories, especially coming from, these stoic warriors.
Right. It's such a contrast to the way he normally approaches death. He's seeing firsthand how these Astartes grieve. They keep the memories of their fallen alive, not just through statues and records, but through these shared stories, these grudges. It's real.
And it makes you wonder, does it change his thinking? I mean, coming in as a scholar, did he expect this kind of emotional depth?
Who knows? But it definitely challenges his ideas about how these super soldiers grieve. And then we get to the ritual itself. It's just raw power. It kind of takes your breath away.
Yeah.
The Crimson Fists, every one of them, draw their swords, cut their hands, and press them to Atherin's statue. It's an intense image, the blood. It says so much about their brotherhood, their willingness to sacrifice, to honor their fallen comrade.
And it makes you think about blood and touch in rituals in different cultures, these primal things that connect us to something deeper than just words,
Exactly. Blood, the essence of life, offered as a tribute to death. Touch, the most basic human connection, used to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. And here it also shows their shared brotherhood, united even in death.
And Esca is seeing something really rare, something usually kept private. His servitor, Solus, is busy recording everything, capturing this moment for, I guess, history. You can feel Esca's excitement. This is huge for his research.
But it's more than data for him. It's a window into the heart of the Crimson Fists, how they deal with loss, how they honor their fallen. It's something that goes beyond the battlefield. It speaks to something deeper about being human.
Then, as the ritual ends, Chaplain Argo says something pretty interesting to Esca. Die well, but live well before that happens. It seems so simple, but I feel like there's a lot packed into those words. What do you think?
Oh, totally. On one level, it's just accepting the danger of their world. That death can come at any time,
Yeah.
especially for Astartes. But it's also about embracing life, living with purpose. It's like this paradox. They face death all the time, but maybe they appreciate life more than anyone.
That's a good point. Does facing death constantly make you value life more? But there's also this sense of duty, right? I mean, they're the defenders of humanity. They have to live up to that ideal. Their lives have to mean something more.
Absolutely. And that sense of duty ties into how they remember their fallen. It's not just mourning. It's about honoring their sacrifice by continuing the fight, by making the galaxy safer for everyone.
Like they carry the memories of their fallen with them into battle, drawing strength from them.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the ritual. It's more than just a ceremony. It's a statement. They're literally marking themselves with the blood of their fallen. It's like a physical embodiment of that connection to their past.
It's a powerful image. And you mentioned earlier how blood and touch are important in rituals across cultures. Can you tell us a little more about that? How does this ritual fit into that bigger picture?
Sure. Throughout history, blood has been seen as something sacred, a link between the physical world and the spiritual. It's the life force. Offering it in a ritual is like connecting with something bigger than yourself. In remembrance, it can be a sacrifice, way to honor the dead.
I see. What about touch? What does that represent?
Touch is primal. It connects us to the world around us. In a lot of cultures, touching the body of someone who's died is a way of saying goodbye, of acknowledging that they're really gone. But it can also be a way of maintaining a connection, of keeping their memory alive.
So for the Crimson Fists, pressing their bleeding hands to Atherin's statue combines those two things, the power of blood and the closeness of touch. It's saying goodbye, honoring his sacrifice, but also keeping his memory alive inside them.
Right. And what's interesting is that this ritual is usually secret. Even people like Esca, who study death and remembrance, rarely get to see it. So the fact that Dembski-Bowden lets us see it says a lot. He wants us to understand these warriors on a deeper level. He's not just interested in the battles, but in what they believe, how they feel, what their rituals mean.
It's that human element that makes it so interesting, so powerful. And it makes us think about how we remember the dead. Do we focus on just the facts and dates, or do we look for those more personal connections, the stories, the laughter, the things that really bring someone's memory to life?
It's a great question, and it's something Esca is struggling with himself. He came to Rin's world as a scholar, to be objective. But he's obviously touched by what he's seen, by how much emotion these warriors show. He's realizing there's more to remembrance than facts and figures.
And that makes you think, will this change how he works? Will he keep just recording facts, or will he try to capture those feelings, those memories that are harder to define but ultimately mean more?
It's a question Dembski-Bowden leaves us with. But I think it's safe to say that Esca won't see death and remembrance the same way after this.
Their ritual, their stories, their whole way of life, it's challenged his ideas and shown him a new way to understand loss and memory. And I think that's one of the most important things we can take away from this. It encourages us to think about how we remember people and to consider not just preserving the past, but also letting it shape us, letting it inspire us.
That's a great way to put it. The Crimson Fists show us that remembrance isn't just about clinging to the past. It's about finding strength in memories, comfort in shared grief, and purpose in shared legacy.
But it also makes you wonder, in a universe as dark as 40K, where hope is hard to find, what role does remembrance play? Is it just a way to hold on to the past, to find comfort? Or could it be something more, like a form of resistance, a way to stay human in the face of all that darkness?
That's a really deep question, and it deserves more thought. But before we go there, let's shift gears and think about how all of this connects with our listeners and their own experiences with loss and memory. Because even though the Crimson Fists are unique, they're also dealing with something universal.
Yeah, good point. Let's bring it back to our listeners and see what they think about all this. It's amazing how Dembski-Bowden takes this huge galaxy-wide war and makes it feel personal. We're not just talking about war and death in some abstract way. We're seeing these warriors deal with grief and loss in a way that feels real, human.
Yeah, so he's contrasting those two things. The massive scale of the Warhammer universe makes those little moments of emotion even stronger. And you're right, the Crimson Fists, even with all their powers and enhancements, they still have the same basic needs as us.
And that reminds me of what Chaplain Argo said to Esca: die well, but live well before that happens. It's like their whole philosophy summed up in one sentence.
It really is.
Mm.
There's this acceptance of death, but also this, like, fire to live life to the fullest.
Mm.
It's strange, isn't it? They face death all the time, but maybe they appreciate life more than anyone.
It makes you think, right? Does facing death all the time make you value life more? But there's also that sense of duty they have. They're the protectors of humanity. They have to live up to that. Their lives have to mean something.
Yeah, for sure. And that sense of duty is tied to how they remember their fallen. It's not just about being sad, it's about honoring their sacrifice by fighting, by making the galaxy a better place.
It's like they carry the memories of their brothers with them when they fight.
That's a good way to put it. It brings us back to that ritual. It's more than just a ceremony, it's like a statement. They're marking themselves with the blood of their fallen, a real physical connection to their past.
It's so intense. And you talked about blood and touch being important in rituals across different cultures. Can you talk more about that? How does this ritual fit in?
Well, for a long time, people have seen blood as something sacred, a connection between the physical and spiritual worlds. It's the life force inside us. So offering it is like connecting to something bigger. When it comes to remembering the dead, it can be a sacrifice, a way to show respect.
I see. And touch. Why is that important?
Touch is like instant. It connects us to what's around us. In a lot of cultures, touching the body of someone who's died is a way to say goodbye, to accept that they're gone. But it can also be a way to stay connected, to keep their memory alive.
So when the Crimson Fists press their bloody hands to the statue, they're combining those two things, the power of blood and that closeness of touch. It's saying goodbye, showing respect, but also keeping the memory of their brother alive inside them.
Exactly. And the thing is, this ritual is usually secret. Even people like Esca who study this stuff don't usually see it. So Dembski-Bowden showing it to us, the readers, it means something. He wants us to really get these warriors. He's not just interested in the fighting. He wants us to see their beliefs, their feelings, what their rituals mean to them.
It's that human side that makes it so powerful, so interesting. It makes you think about how we all remember people. Do we just focus on the facts? Or do we try to connect with those memories, the stories, the things that really make someone come alive in our minds?
It's an important question, and it's something Esca is thinking about. He came to Rin's world to just be an observer, but he's been changed by what he's seen, the way these warriors feel things. It's making him realize there's more to remembrance than just facts.
So will it change how he works? Will he stop just writing down facts and try to capture those feelings, those memories that are harder to explain but mean so much more?
That's what Dembski-Bowden wants us to think about. But I don't think Esca will ever look at death and remembrance the same way again.
The ritual, their stories, their whole way of life, it's changed his mind about them. He sees a new way to understand loss. And I think that's a big takeaway for us, too. It makes us think about how we remember people, not just keeping the past alive, but letting it change us, letting it give us direction.
That's a good way to put it. The Crimson Fists show us that remembering isn't just about holding on to the past. It's about finding strength in it, finding comfort together, and having a shared purpose.
But it also makes you think, in a universe like 40K, so bleak and hopeless, what good is remembering? Is it just holding on to the past for comfort? Or is it something bigger, like fighting back, staying human when everything is trying to make you less than human?
That's a really interesting question. We should talk more about that. But first, let's think about our listeners. How does this connect to their own experiences with loss and remembering? Because what the Crimson Fists are doing, it's unique to them, but it's also something we all deal with.
Good point. Let's bring it back to our listeners. So we've been talking about finding meaning in loss, right? Especially in a universe as brutal as Warhammer 40K. The Crimson Fists are constantly at war, facing death, but they don't shy away from grief, do they? They use it. It's in their rituals, their stories, their whole way of life.
Yeah, it's like they're saying the best way to honor the dead is to really live, to fight for what you believe in, to make those bonds of brotherhood that even death can't break.
It's a powerful message, and I think it speaks to all of us, We've all lost someone. We all try to figure out how to deal with it, how to keep their memory alive. The Crimson Fists, they give us a different way to look at it.
They show us that it's not just about remembering, it's about carrying those memories with you, letting them change you, affect your actions, your relationships, the way you see the world. Remembering is not just sitting around thinking about the past. It's about doing something with it.
And it's interesting how that plays out in 40K, right? They're fighting chaos, sure, but they're also fighting something else. Despair, that darkness that wants to swallow everything.
Exactly. And that's what makes their rituals so powerful. Their stories, their insistence on remembering. It's like a rebellion. They're choosing hope. They're finding purpose even when everything seems hopeless.
It's like memory itself is a way to fight back, to hold on to your humanity when everything is trying to take it from you.
It's a powerful idea, right? And I think Dembski-Bowden wants us to think about it. He's not giving us simple answers. He's showing us this world where hope and despair are always fighting. And he's asking, where does memory fit in?
So as we finish up this deep dive, I want to leave you with some questions. What did you find most interesting about how the Crimson Fists remember their fallen? How do you keep the memories of those you've lost alive? Do you have rituals, stories, anything like that? And how do those memories affect your life, the way you see the world?
These are questions that go beyond just Warhammer, right?
Yeah.
They're about what it means to be human, our need to connect, to remember, to find meaning when we lose someone. And even though the answers are different for everyone, just asking these questions shows how powerful memory is.
That's a great way to put it, and a good way to end our look at For the Fallen. We hope this deep dive made you think about Warhammer 40K in a new way, and made you think about your own experiences with loss and memory. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those memories alive.